When I filed my third complaint, they told me to focus on productivity instead of suspecting others. 9 months later, I exposed the entire executive team in front of the board of directors and cost them nearly $10 million. Yes, I'm the one who burned every bridge behind me, and I don't regret a single thing. They thought I was just another disposable office worker who would eventually fall in line. They were wrong. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. My name is Elena Cross. And for 6 years, I believed in the system. I believed that hard work, integrity, and following the rules would be rewarded. At 34, I was a senior financial analyst at Virexon Inc., one of Denver's most celebrated B2B tech companies. From the outside, we were the poster child of modern corporate success. Glass towers reflecting the Rocky Mountains, ping-pong tables in break rooms, and diversity statements plastered on every wall. The reality was different. Behind the polished exterior, Virexon operated like any other corporate machine, crushing KPIs, endless meetings about meetings, and a political landscape more treacherous than anything you'd find in Washington. Still, I thrived in it. Numbers don't lie, I told myself. In a world of corporate doublespeak, financial data was pure truth. My corner office on the 14th floor wasn't much, but it had a view of downtown Denver that made the late nights bearable. I'd earned that space through countless audits, budget projections that saved millions, and an ability to spot discrepancies that others missed. My colleagues called me Eagle Eye Elena, half mockery, half respect. I wore it like a badge of honor. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was reviewing quarterly expense reports when I noticed an invoice from a vendor I'd never heard of, Millbridge Solutions. The amount wasn't enormous, $47,000 for consulting services. But something felt off. In 6 years, I'd memorized our vendor list like other people memorize song lyrics. Hey, Marcus, I called to my colleague across the cubicle farm. You ever hear of Millbridge Solutions? He barely looked up from his triple monitor setup. Nope, probably some new AI optimization firm. You know how Ethan loves his tech consultants. Ethan Van, our CFO, brilliant, charismatic, and untouchable. He transformed Virexon's financial operations, turning us from a struggling startup into a billion-dollar valuation. The board loved him. The CEO deferred to him. And apparently, he loved tech consultants I'd never heard of. I pulled up our vendor approval system. Every new vendor required 3 signatures: department head, finance review, and compliance check. Millbridge had all 3, dated just 2 weeks ago. But when I clicked on the finance review signature, my own department, I didn't recognize the name. Sarah Hendricks. According to our system, she worked in my division. I'd never met a Sarah Hendricks. The corporate directory showed her employee ID, start date 6 months ago, and a generic email address. No photo, no phone extension, no desk assignment. In a department of 12 people where we all knew each other's coffee orders, Sarah Hendricks was a ghost. I should have stopped there. Should have assumed it was a glitch. A contractor miscategorized, any of a dozen reasonable explanations. But numbers don't lie. And neither does that feeling in your gut when something's wrong. Over the next 3 days, I found 17 more invoices from Millbridge Solutions, totaling $823,000 over 8 months. All approved by Sarah Hendricks. All for vague, consulting services with no deliverables attached. All paid within 24 hours, remarkably fast for a company that typically took 45 days to process vendor payments. The smart thing would have been to go to my direct manager, Robert Kim. With my concerns, follow the chain of command, trust the system. But I'd sat through enough compliance training to know the first rule of corporate whistleblowing: document everything before you say anything. So I documented screenshots, invoice copies, approval chains, payment records. I built a file that would make any auditor weep with joy. And then, on a Friday afternoon when most of the office had already left for happy hour, I knocked on Robert's door. "Elena," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "If this is about the Q3 projections, I already sent them to... It's about Millbridge Solutions. His fingers stopped moving, just for a second. Then he closed his laptop and gave me his full attention. Never a good sign. What about them? I laid out my findings. The mysterious approvals, the vague invoices, the rapid payments. Robert listened without interrupting, his face growing more serious with each detail. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. "You've been thorough," he said finally. "As always." "So what do we do?" "We follow protocol. Write up a formal report. I'll review it over the weekend and escalate to the appropriate channels Monday morning." Relief flooded through me. The system was working. I wasn't crazy. Robert saw what I saw. "Thank you," I said, standing to leave. "I'll have the report on your desk within the hour." "Elena." His voice stopped me at the door. "This is sensitive. Let's keep it between us until we know more." "Of course." I should have known then. Should have recognized the careful words, the calculated pause. But I still believed in the system. I still believed that doing the right thing mattered. I submitted my report at 4:47 p.m. that Friday. By Monday morning, everything had changed. Monday arrived with an email that made my blood run cold. Not from Robert, but from HR. "Mandatory meeting at 9 a.m. Please bring your laptop and access badges." The HR conference room smelled like vanilla air freshener and disappointment. Waiting for me were Robert, an HR representative named Janet Walsh, whom I'd barely spoken to in 6 years, and a man in an expensive suit I didn't recognize. "Elena," Janet began with a practiced smile. "Thank you for coming. This is Thomas Brennan from Legal." "Legal." My stomach dropped. "We've reviewed your recent concerns about vendor payments," she continued, sliding a document across the table. "While we appreciate your diligence, we need to discuss the proper channels for raising such matters." I glanced at Robert. He was studying his coffee cup like it contained the secrets of the universe. "I followed proper channels," I said carefully. "I reported my findings to my direct supervisor." "Yes, but," Thomas Brennan interjected, his voice sharp as his suit. "Accessing payment records outside your designated purview could be construed as a violation of our data security policies. Those records are within my purview. I'm a senior financial analyst. Reviewing vendor payments is literally my job." "For vendors assigned to your portfolio," he countered, "Millbridge Solutions falls under strategic initiatives, not your department." Strategic initiatives. The black box of corporate spending where normal rules didn't apply. Janet pushed another paper forward. "We're not taking any disciplinary action at this time. However, we need you to sign this acknowledgement that you've been counseled on appropriate access protocols." I read the document. In corporate legalese, it essentially said I'd been snooping where I shouldn't and promised not to do it again. Signing it would kill any future credibility if I pursued this further. "I need time to review this," I said. "Of course. You have until end of day." Janet's smile never wavered. "Oh, and Elena? We're reassigning you to the Eastern Region audit, effective immediately. Robert will redistribute your current workload." The Eastern Region audit, a mind-numbing project reviewing 3 years of sales receipts from our smallest market. Busy work disguised as important analysis. Corporate exile. I spent the rest of the day tracing Millbridge Solutions deeper into our system. What I found made my hands shake. The payments weren't just continuing, they were accelerating. In the past month alone, $247,000 had flowed to this phantom company. More disturbing, I found references to Millbridge in emails between Ethan Van and several board members discussing Phase 2 implementation and expanded consulting framework. By 4 p.m., I hadn't signed the acknowledgement. Instead, I'd drafted a formal complaint following our company's whistleblower policy, specifically citing the suspicious payments and requesting a full audit. I sent it to HR, copying our ethics hotline and the audit committee chair. The response came within minutes. An auto-generated email. "Thank you for your submission. Your concern has been logged as case number 2847. You will receive a response within 10 to 15 business days." That evening, as I packed up my desk to move to the Eastern Region audit cave, I noticed something odd. My access to the shared finance drives was restricted. Passwords that had worked that morning now returned access denied. Even my email archive was limited to the past 30 days. IT maintenance, Robert explained when I asked, not meeting my eyes. Should be resolved soon. But we both knew better. Over the next 3 weeks, I filed 2 more complaints, each more detailed than the last. I documented every blocked access, every ignored request, every suspicious transaction I could still see from my limited vantage point. The responses were form letters. Under review. No policy violation found. Please focus on your assigned duties. My colleagues began treating me like I had something contagious. Conversations stopped when I entered the break room. Meeting invites disappeared from my calendar. Even Marcus, who'd sat across from me for 4 years, relocated to a different floor for project coordination. The isolation was deliberate, surgical, not enough to claim retaliation, just enough to make me question my sanity. Then came the morning I found a sticky note on my monitor. Some bridges aren't worth burning. A friend. That's when I knew. This wasn't incompetence or bureaucracy. This was active suppression. Millbridge Solutions wasn't just a suspicious vendor. It was something worth protecting, worth threatening an employee over. I photocopied every document I could still access, downloaded every email, every approval chain, every financial record onto a personal drive. If they wanted to play games with protocol and proper channels, fine. But I'd be damned if I'd let them erase the evidence. The next complaint I filed wouldn't be internal. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was fighting. Late nights and weekends became my research time, tracing shell companies and following money trails. What I found would make that $823,000 look like pocket change. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First came the meeting that changed everything, the one where HR finally showed their true colors. Elena, Janet Walsh said, sitting across from me in the same vanilla-scented conference room. We need to talk about your future at Virexen. Your performance has been concerning lately, Janet continued, shuffling papers she wasn't really reading. Multiple complaints about accessing restricted systems, falling behind on the Eastern Region audit, and creating a hostile work environment for your colleagues. Hostile work environment? I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. By asking about fraudulent vendor payments, by making unfounded accusations that damaged team morale, she slid a performance improvement plan across the table. Effective immediately, you'll report to Sandra Martinez in regional compliance. Any further attempts to access systems outside your designated area will result in immediate termination. Regional compliance, the corporate equivalent of Siberia, tucked away on the 3rd floor with outdated computers and no access to real financial data. But what caught my attention was the signature at the bottom of the PIP, Ethan Van himself. The CFO personally signed my performance plan? I asked. Janet's smile flickered. Mr. Van takes all personnel matters seriously. That night, I forwarded every work email I could to my personal account before they cut off access entirely. By morning, my corporate email was restricted to internal communications only. No ability to send outside the company. No access to archived messages. Digital house arrest. The paranoia crept in slowly. Was that car following me home? Why did my computer suddenly need IT maintenance 3 times in 1 week? When I mentioned my concerns to Robert, he pulled me aside with genuine fear in his eyes. Elena, please, just focus on your new role. Some things aren't worth pursuing. Is that a threat? It's advice from someone who's been here 12 years. This goes deeper than you think. But I'd already gone too deep to surface now. Working from my apartment at night, using a laptop I'd bought with cash, I pieced together the full scope of Millbridge Solutions. It wasn't just one shell company. It was a network. Millbridge connected to Paramount Consulting, which linked to Apex Strategic Partners, which circled back to Innovative Business Solutions. All approved by the mysterious Sarah Hendricks. All flowing money in a careful dance that would make a forensic accountant dizzy. The pattern was elegant in its simplicity. Virexan would pay Millbridge for consulting. Millbridge would subcontract to Paramount. Paramount would hire Apex. And somehow, the money would evaporate, leaving only vague deliverables and sealed invoices. But where did it ultimately go? I found my answer in a careless email thread someone forgot to delete. Apex Strategic Partners had one registered officer, Patricia Van, Ethan's wife, $3.2 million in the past 18 months. That's how much had flowed through this network of phantom companies, all ending up in accounts controlled by our CFO's family. And based on the projection documents I'd found, they were planning to triple that number in the next fiscal year. The morning after I made this connection, I arrived at work to find my desk cleaned out, my belongings in a cardboard box. Budget cuts, Sandra Martinez explained, though she couldn't meet my eyes. We're eliminating your position. HR will explain your severance package. The severance was generous, suspiciously so. 3 months' salary, full benefits extension, and a glowing recommendation letter. All contingent on signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement that specifically mentioned proprietary financial information and vendor relationships. You have 1 week to consider the offer, Janet Walsh said, sliding the thick document across her desk. I'd encourage you to take it. The job market is challenging right now. I signed nothing. Instead, I went home and called the SEC whistleblower hotline. The agent who answered sounded tired, like he'd heard too many conspiracy theories from disgruntled employees. Without documented evidence and current access to verify claims, there's limited action we can take. He explained, your former employer's legal team will argue you're a terminated employee seeking revenge. Do you have anyone currently employed who can corroborate? I thought of Robert's fearful eyes, Marcus avoiding me, Sandra's guilty expression. No. Then I'm afraid. I hung up before he could finish. The system had failed me at every level. Internal compliance, HR, regulatory agencies. Everyone seemed more interested in protecting the status quo than investigating millions in fraud. That night, sitting in my apartment with boxes of evidence and nowhere to take it, I realized the truth. You can't fight a corrupt system using that same system's rules. They'd written those rules specifically to protect themselves. If I wanted justice, I'd have to burn it all down. And I knew exactly how to light the match. But first, I needed to dig deeper, to find proof so irrefutable that no amount of corporate lawyers could explain it away. The real investigation was just beginning. And this time, I wasn't playing by their rules. The email came at 2 a.m. from an address I didn't recognize. Stop digging or start running. I smiled grimly at my laptop screen. They had no idea who they were threatening. I'd already lost everything that mattered to me at Virexan. Now it was their turn to lose something. The threat email was a mistake on their part. They'd revealed they were watching me, which meant I was on the right track. I spent the next 2 weeks becoming nocturnal, digging through the data I'd saved before my access was cut. Coffee became my blood, and spreadsheets my dreams. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, social media. Patricia Van, Ethan's wife, had an Instagram account full of luxury vacations. Maldives in January, Swiss Alps in March, private yacht in the Mediterranean in June. The timestamps matched perfectly with large payments to Apex Strategic Partners. But it was a single photo that cracked everything open. Patricia christening a new yacht named Millbridge Dream. Arrogance. It would be their downfall. I cross-referenced every payment date with public records, social media posts, and property filings. The pattern was staggering. As Millbridge Solutions received payments, luxury purchases appeared, a $2.8 million vacation home in Aspen, a collection of vintage cars, artwork from exclusive auctions. The Vans were living like royalty on Virexan's dime. But Ethan wasn't working alone. The approval chains showed a rotating cast of executives signing off on payments. Janet Walsh from HR had approved several invoices. 3 board members had signed strategic initiative authorizations. Even the head of internal audit, Marcus Zhao, had mysteriously approved payments outside his jurisdiction. They weren't just enabling fraud, they were participating in it. I mapped the entire network on my living room wall, using string to connect payments to approvals to purchases. It looked like something from a conspiracy theorist's fever dream, but every connection was documented, every dollar traced. The total was staggering, $9.8 million, over 3 years. But knowing and proving were different things. I needed current evidence, active fraud happening in real time. That meant getting back into Virexon's systems. I still had one ally, though she didn't know it. Melissa Chen in IT had helped me numerous times over the years, and I'd noticed she always used the same password pattern. During a system migration last year, she'd accidentally sent me her temporary credentials. The pattern was simple: season plus year plus department. It was autumn now. At 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, I sat in a 24-hour diner with my laptop, connected through multiple VPNs. My hands shook as I typed Fall 2024 IT. Access granted. I had minutes, maybe less, before security protocols flagged the unusual login. I navigated directly to the payment queue, my heart hammering. There it was, a pending payment to Millbridge Solutions for $485,000, scheduled for approval the next morning. But this time, there was an attachment, a detailed invoice for Q4 Strategic Transformation Services. I downloaded everything I could. Invoice templates, email threads discussing payment structures, even a spreadsheet titled MS Payment Schedule 2024-2025 that projected $15 million in future transfers. The smoking gun came in an encrypted folder labeled Board Presentations. Inside was a PowerPoint deck for an upcoming board meeting. Slide 23 made my blood freeze. Millbridge acquisition proposal, converting vendor relationship to subsidiary status. They weren't just stealing. They were planning to legitimize the entire operation by having Virexon officially acquire the shell company, effectively laundering all previous payments and setting up an even larger pipeline for fraud. I screenshot everything, downloaded every file, then covered my tracks and logged out. The entire session had taken 8 minutes. Back in my apartment, I analyzed what I'd found. The acquisition was scheduled for board approval in 6 weeks, during the annual shareholder meeting. Once approved, any investigation would become infinitely more complex. They were rushing to cover their tracks, but they'd made one crucial error. The acquisition documents listed Millbridge's key personnel, including Sarah Hendricks, the ghost employee who'd approved so many payments. Her listed address was a P.O. box, but her social security number was there for tax purposes. It took me 3 days to trace that number. Sarah Hendricks didn't exist. The SSN belonged to a woman who died in 2019. They'd created a completely fictitious employee to rubber stamp millions in fraudulent payments. I now had everything: the shell company network, the fraudulent employee, the luxury purchases, the planned cover-up through acquisition, and a clear timeline showing acceleration of payments before the board meeting. Even better, I had current, active fraud happening in real time. But who would listen? The SEC had already brushed me off. The FBI would require months of investigation. By then, the acquisition would be complete, and the evidence would be buried under layers of legal corporate structure. No, I needed something faster, more public, something that would force immediate action. I thought back to my journalism minor in college, to the lessons about how Watergate wasn't broken by the FBI but by 2 reporters who wouldn't let go of the story. The press could move faster than any government agency, and public scandal could destroy what legal maneuvering might protect. It was time to find my deep throat moment. But first, I needed to ensure my evidence was bulletproof and my story was undeniable. I had 2 weeks to compile everything into a package so comprehensive, so damning, that no editor could ignore it. The game had changed. I was no longer trying to save Virexon from fraud. I was going to expose everyone involved and watch their carefully constructed empire crumble. They should have just let me file my complaint. The collapse was swift and brutal. By noon, Virexon's stock had plummeted 47%. CNBC was running breaking news banners. Tech giant Virexon faces federal investigation. CFO Ethan Van taken into custody. $9.8 million fraud scheme exposed by whistleblower. I watched it all unfold from my apartment. Blinds drawn. Phones turned off except for a burner I'd bought for emergencies. Diana called every hour with updates, her voice electric with the adrenaline of breaking news. Elena, the FBI just raided the corporate offices. They're carrying out boxes of documents. And get this, Janet Walsh tried to flee. They caught her at the airport. By evening, the dominoes were falling fast. 3 board members resigned in disgrace. The SEC announced a formal investigation into securities fraud. The Colorado Attorney General was preparing criminal charges. And Ethan Van, the untouchable CFO who'd built his empire on Virexon's trust, was facing 25 years in federal prison. The employee emails poured into my old account, forwarded by a sympathetic former colleague. Some thanked me, others cursed me for destroying their stock value. But one stood out, from Robert Kim, my old manager. I should have listened. I'm sorry. Too little, too late. But at least he'd learned something. Day 2 brought more revelations. Other journalists, smelling blood in the water, dug deeper into Virexon's finances. They found more schemes, inflated revenue projections, hidden debt, executive bonuses tied to fraudulent metrics. My exposure of Millbridge had been just the beginning. The entire company was a house of cards, and I'd pulled out the bottom one. Patricia Van's Instagram went dark, but not before screenshots circulated of her trying to sell the yacht named Millbridge Dream. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Local news caught her loading suitcases into a moving van. Her perfect life dismantled in 48 hours. By day 3, the FBI had expanded their investigation. The ghost employee scheme led them to similar frauds at 2 other companies where Ethan had previously worked. The man hadn't just stolen from Virexon, he'd perfected his craft over a decade, leaving a trail of financial destruction hidden by aggressive lawyers and intimidated whistleblowers. But I was different. I'd kept every threat, documented every attempt to silence me. When the FBI asked for my cooperation, I handed over everything, including the anonymous stop digging or start running email that their cyber crimes unit traced back to Virexon's head of security. The shareholder lawsuits started on day 4. Class action attorneys smelled opportunity, representing employees whose retirement funds had evaporated with the stock price. They wanted me as their star witness. I declined. My fight had been for truth, not money. Diana's follow-up articles won awards. She exposed the network of complicit auditors who'd turned blind eyes for hefty fees. She traced how board members had protected each other through interlocking directorates at other companies. She even found 3 other employees who'd tried to raise concerns before me, only to be terminated or transferred into oblivion. A week after my email, Virexon declared bankruptcy. 3,000 employees lost their jobs. Retirement accounts vanished, lives were destroyed, and all because a handful of executives thought they were too powerful to face consequences. Some nights, I wondered if I should feel guilty about the collateral damage. Then I remembered the systematic way they'd tried to destroy me for telling the truth. I remembered Janet Walsh's condescending smile, Ethan Van's signature on my performance review, the nights I'd spent questioning my own sanity while they stole millions. No, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The criminal trials would take months, maybe years. The bankruptcy proceedings would drag on even longer. But the message had been sent, loud and clear. You can't silence someone who has nothing left to lose. On my last morning in Denver, I stood outside Virexon's abandoned headquarters. The protesters were gone, replaced by bankruptcy notices and federal seizure tape. The glass towers that once reflected the Rocky Mountains now reflected only empty offices and shattered dreams. A security guard I recognized from my years there approached me. Ms. Cross? I just wanted to say, thank you. My wife worked in accounting. She knew something was wrong but was too scared to speak up. You did what none of us could. I nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in my throat. Then I got in my car and drove away, leaving Denver and Virexon in my rearview mirror. The media requests kept coming. Book deals, movie rights, speaking engagements. I refused them all. This had never been about fame or fortune. It had been about a simple principle. When you discover the truth, you have an obligation to share it, no matter the cost. They'd thought I was just another disposable employee who would eventually fall in line. They'd thought their power and connections could silence anyone who challenged them. They'd thought wrong. As I crossed the state line into New Mexico, heading toward a new life under a sun that didn't know my name, I allowed myself one small smile. Somewhere, in federal holding cells and empty mansions, they were learning what I'd always known. Numbers don't lie. And neither do the people who refuse to be silenced. 6 months later, I was a ghost. The woman who'd brought down Virexon had vanished completely. Elena Cross existed only in court documents and news archives. I'd legally changed my name, moved to a small coastal town in Oregon, and started over with the kind of anonymity money couldn't buy. I worked at a local bookstore, surrounded by stories of other people's triumphs and tragedies. My colleagues knew me as Sarah. Yes, I'd chosen that name deliberately. A private joke only I understood. They didn't know about my past, about the FBI testimony I'd given via encrypted video link, or about the $20 million in assets they'd frozen from Ethan Van's criminal enterprise. The trials made headlines for months. Ethan got 18 years federal time. Janet Walsh got 5. 3 board members received lesser sentences in exchange for cooperation. Even Marcus Zhao, my old colleague who'd relocated to avoid me, got 2 years probation for his role in approving fraudulent payments. The justice system, when finally forced to act, had been thorough. But I wasn't following the trials anymore. I'd said my piece, provided my evidence, and walked away. The media still occasionally tried to find me. Where is the Virexon whistleblower became a popular topic on true crime podcasts. Diana Rodriguez respected my wishes and never revealed my location, though we exchanged encrypted emails on anniversaries of the story breaking. One foggy morning, as I was opening the bookstore, I found an envelope slipped under the door. No postmark, no return address. Inside was a single page, a printout of a Forbes article. Virexon whistleblower inspires new federal protections for corporate truth-tellers. Congress had passed enhanced whistleblower protections, making it harder for companies to silence employees who reported fraud. They called it the Cross Act. I burned the article in my fireplace that night, watching my old name turn to ash. But I kept the knowledge that maybe, just maybe, the next person who found million-dollar fraud wouldn't have to lose everything to expose it. My new life was smaller, quieter. I had a studio apartment with an ocean view, a cat named Millbridge, another private joke, and peace. The salary was a fraction of what I'd made at Virexon, but I slept soundly. No more 3 a.m. paranoia. No more checking for cars following me. No more wondering if my computer was monitored. Sometimes customers would mention the Virexon scandal, not knowing they were talking to the person who'd exposed it. "Can you believe she gave up everything just to tell the truth?" they'd say. I don't know if I could do that. I'd just smile and ring up their purchases, thinking about the weight of truth and the price of silence. The bookstore owner, an elderly woman named Ruth who'd hired me without asking too many questions, once told me, "You know, Sarah, you remind me of someone who's been through a storm. Not damaged by it, but refined." She was right. The storm had stripped away everything I thought mattered: career, reputation, financial security, professional identity. But what remained was clearer, stronger. I'd learned that integrity isn't about following rules, it's about breaking them when they protect the corrupt. On the 1-year anniversary of the expose, I received one last email on my old account, forwarded through multiple proxies. It was from a young analyst at a different company, someone I'd never met. "Ms. Cross, you don't know me, but your story gave me courage. I found similar fraud at my company. Because of the Cross Act. I was protected when I reported it. The executives were arrested last week. Thank you for showing us it's possible to win. I closed the email account permanently that day. Elena Cross had done what she needed to do. That evening, I walked along the beach, watching the sun set over the Pacific. A couple passed by with their young daughter, who was collecting shells. She ran up to me, offering a perfect sand dollar she'd found. "It's lucky," she announced with the certainty only children possess. I accepted it with a smile. "Thank you. Sometimes we all need a little luck." As they walked away, I held the sand dollar up to the fading light. It was intact, unbroken despite the ocean's violence. Like truth, I thought, battered by waves but ultimately surviving. I thought about Ethan in his federal cell, about Janet learning to survive without her corporate armor, about all the executives who'd believed themselves untouchable. I thought about the employees who'd lost their jobs but gained the knowledge that someone had fought for them. I thought about the future whistleblowers who would find protection because of what I'd endured. They'd all called me a hero or a villain, depending on their perspective. But I was neither. I was just someone who'd seen numbers that didn't add up and refused to pretend otherwise. Someone who'd learned that when the system fails you, sometimes you have to become the system's failure. The waves crashed against the shore, eternal and honest. I threw the sand dollar back into the ocean. I didn't need luck anymore. I had something better. The knowledge that when they'd tried to silence me, I'd found a voice they couldn't ignore. They thought I was just another disposable office worker who would eventually fall in line. They were wrong. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in my position? Let's discuss in the comments below.